What is the most absurd thing that happened this weekend? Will anything match it in the conference title round? What are the Eagles' biggest needs on offense this offseason? All that and more on today's episode of Chalk Talk. Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 40 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing this afternoon?
Doing well. Happy to be talking Eagles. We got a special guest though, so let's get to him.
Yeah, without any further ado, let me introduce our special guest, the godfather of the Painted Lines, the guy that I just murdered in a dueling mock drafts less than an hour ago. It is Dibes, Mr. Crockpot on Twitter. Dibes, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing much better, man. I literally spent the last 48 hours in bed dealing with COVID-19. So this is the first day I haven't had severe fatigue. Obviously, no party on Broad this week, so I've been dying to talk some Eagles. This draft season, and I during our dueling mock, I conceded I liked your team a lot more than my team. But that being said, vote for my team, guys. Go vote at the Painted Lines on Twitter and vote for Team Dives. Come on, man.
I'd love to talk smack, but Dives smacked me around a little bit in our mock draft. I had a poor performance. The picks didn't fall my way. Ojabo didn't fall. I started spiraling.
Did you see ours yet?
I did. Mark? I loved yours. I tweeted about it. I loved yours. Ojabo and Sauce are the guys that I'm targeting at 15 and 16 every time. So anytime I see those two names, I'm all in. Yes, I said the only way you could have fixed it to make it a little more perfect. I said it was like you were drafting for me. But if you would have taken Dives' second round pick, David Bell, instead of Cena, and then maybe instead of London, you would have taken Dives 1 first and Devin Lloyd. That would have been if you got Sauce, Ojabo, Lloyd, David Bell, Kyron Williams. That would be my perfect top 5.
I thought of you when I drafted Kyron Williams.
I'm sure.
So there's an element of playing to the viewers, and there's an element of playing to your co-host that might retweet it and say nice things about your draft. So we balance all of that here, for sure. But if you guys don't have a clue what we're talking about, check it out. It's on our YouTube page. The polls are up on YouTube and Twitter. I'll retweet that after the show. I didn't get around to that in between shows here. But we do have a great show lined up for you guys today. We're going to get into the Eagles offense. We're going to break down stats and power rank positions of need heading into the offseason. Then we're going to review the divisional wild card. We're going to review the divisional round playoff games, 4 crazy games with some crazy outcomes. Then we're going to open up an Eagles mailbag and answer a few questions that you guys submitted to me on Twitter, and we will wrap it up taking a brief look at the conference championship games this weekend. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to look at some stats, and we're going to dive into this Eagles offense. And so we're going to start, if I get it up here, can you guys see that okay? I think that's okay. All right, we're going to start with the most important position. That is the quarterback position. Jalen Hurts came into the year starting a couple of games last year. He's the full season starter this year, minus the 1 game missed with an injury in Week 18 when he did not play. He ends the year 265 for 432, which is a 61% completion percentage for 3,144 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. And then we'll scroll down and we'll get his rushing stats here. He also had 139 rushing attempts, which was the leading on the team, for 784 yards, also leading the team, 10 touchdowns, which led the team, and 5.6 yards per carry. And so, Dibes, I'll throw it to you first as our guest. Tell me where you're at with Jalen Hurts. How do you view the quarterback position going forward for the Eagles? Is this a need to address this offseason?
Let's go into kind of the positives. I think it was a truly up and down year for Jalen Hurts. There were more positives than negatives. He did show improvement. He does earn that right to start in that 2022 season, but that by no means means the Eagles should be not looking ahead beyond next season and, finding an elite quarterback. You look at last weekend, man, what a joy it was to watch playoff football last week. It was arguably the best weekend of football I've ever seen, period. The quarterbacks that you saw, the throws that you saw, the playmakers that you saw, the Eagles are a long way from taking that next step. They're a long way. They need playmakers. They need stars across the board, and that includes the quarterback position. I'm sorry, guys. This Josh Allen versus Jalen Hurts garbage is just delusional. It is straight delusional that we've seen this discussion over the last week. Jalen Hurts has a lot of areas to improve upon, hitting guys in stride, going through his progressions, seeing the field better, being more accurate down the field. I'm a little – I don't want to look at that, man. The thing with Josh Allen is he just made dumb rookie mistakes. The talent was always there, at least on my end. For Jalen Hurts, it's literally the exact opposite. Jalen Hurts is an excellent game manager. That's what he is. In order to make that next step, man, the odds are stacked incredibly against his favor. That's the truth. So for me, Jalen Hurts earns that right to start next year. Looking at this draft, the plan, the goal has to be putting all of your trade chips, looking at the year, not this year, but the year after, and getting ready. Because if you don't have an elite quarterback, man, it is what it is. It's tough. The hill to climb is that much steeper if you don't have that kind of elite guy that's going to take your team to that next step. That's just how I see it. Nothing against Jalen Hurts, and the dude works tirelessly off the field. I think he will put the work in. We'll see. So for me, he was in that like C plus range for me. So he's got a lot to work on, no doubt.
What about you, Mark? How do you feel about Hurts through his first full season as a starter?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree about much of what Dive said. The one thing I'll push back on this, honestly, is like less about Jalen Hurts and more about just an overall conversation about last weekend. And I will say, and it's obviously, you could say that this is the exception to the rule. I will say that the San Francisco 49ers have a chance to go to their second Super Bowl in the last 3 years with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I know that that's, like you said, and I think you put it well, when you don't have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or, Joe Burrow or Aaron Rodgers or, name the list goes on and on. Matthew Stafford maybe is even on that list. But it becomes harder for sure. But the 49ers have shown that you've been able to do it. The Rams did it with Jared Goff. And obviously the Vikings went to the conference championship with Case Keenum. It obviously helps to have an elite quarterback, but I do think, there's not usually a lot of those to go around. So at a certain point, you do have to kind of be accepting of what Jalen Hurts is. And to me, that's the 16th to 19th best quarterback in football. And does that win you a Super Bowl? Probably not. But unless you have the right situation around it, because I'd argue if you put Jalen Hurts on the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think they could probably have been playing last weekend. I'd argue the same thing about the Cleveland Browns. I'd argue the same thing about the San Fran 49ers. I think if you put Jalen Hurts on that team, they might be a little better just because of the rushing impact that would bring and the fact that they won a game with 120 passing yards last week. So it's just, you have to compare them to those guys in the middle to me, which is your Kirk Cousins, your Jimmy G's, your Mac Jones, even you can throw him in there. And it compared to those guys, I think he compares pretty favorably and he compares correctly to them. And the Josh Allen comparison's ridiculous. That's that's just something where Josh Allen had physical tools, but he was a complete project coming out of Wyoming with a lot less experience than Jalen Hurts had. That's a dumb comparison, and the stats are obviously they look pretty favorable towards Jalen Hurts there, but I don't really pay that any mind. The guy I would compare him a little bit more to is a guy like Kyler Murray in terms of his rookie year and his first amount of starts, where he was not really winning a lot of games. He was probably 6-10, I think, his first year, something like that. And I think that Kyler Murray is kind of the guy I'd like to see that comparison more too. And we've seen even now Kyler Murray in his Shane could help me out here, third year, I think. You've seen still he's struggled and had a terrible playoff game and hasn't won a playoff game, and this is his first time we even got there. And you could blame a lot of the surroundings to that too. But I think Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray would be an interesting comparison. I'd like to see those kind of numbers instead of Josh Allen. And maybe you could argue he could kind of ascend to what Kyler Murray has become. I'd argue he doesn't have quite the physical tools that Kyler does, but you could argue he could get to that point in my opinion. But anytime I hear the Lamar Jackson or the Josh Allen rumors, I kind of roll my eyes at it.
In Kyler Murray's first season, he completed 64% of his passes, which is 3% above Jalen Hurts for 3,700 yards versus 3,100 for Hurts. He had 20 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, whereas Hurts was 16 to 9. If you look at the rushing totals, let's see. Rushing, he had 93 carries for 544 yards.
That was the year that Arizona really – I don't know what Kyler's rushing's been since then, but I remember his rookie year, it really felt like they were like trying to force him not to run. I remember like it felt like they were trying to force him in the pocket to keep throwing. I don't know if his rushing's been up or down since then, though.
So here's the thing. Oh, go ahead, Dives.
Would you guys – what's your quick thoughts on this question? If like Green Bay or Pittsburgh wants to like quickly rebuild and they offer like a first or like a second and a player or some future asset, would you move Jalen Hurts in a trade like that?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. But I would have to have a plan for quarterback this year. I wouldn't want to go in with just Minshew, even though I do think Minshew is a fringe starter. But I don't think in Sirianni's second year coming off a playoff season where Eagles fans are going to expect that again. And you know, it's not for long. Sirianni, you can't tell Nick Sirianni, hey, we're going to take a step back and you're going to be fine. And then we go 3-13 and that conversation changes immediately, I think. And I think people would start calling this 9-8 season fraudulent and saying it didn't mean anything. And then Sirianni might get fired. So I don't think that you could do that to Sirianni. And I don't think he'd sign on to that. But if they did that and they were like, all right, we're going to use that in part to go get Kenny Pickett, and Kenny Pickett's going to be our guy, or we're going to draft a Carson Strong. Maybe we like Matt Corral. Maybe we like Malik Willis, Sam Howell. Maybe we like all these guys. Who knows? I think I'm even missing a name there. But I think that maybe that happens. But you can't just trade Jalen Hurts and be like, oh, we're going to tank and we're going to kind of not do anything at the quarterback position. You'd have to make a move for a Derek Carr or a Jimmy G or even like a Baker. Like you'd have to do something, at least for a short-term answer.
And so we break quarterbacks down into three tiers. You've got the quarterbacks you win because of, the quarterbacks you win with, and the quarterbacks you win in spite of. Mm-hmm. Jalen Hurts is a quarterback you win with. You don't win because of him. You don't win in spite of him. You win with him. And I don't ever see him ascending to that quarterbacks you win because of tier. And I think if you don't have a quarterback in that tier, you should always be looking. That doesn't mean that you should go mortgage your future to get one. But you look at a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, who were drafting number 1 overall 2 years ago, and they got their guy in Joe Burrow, who played a few games and got hurt, but in his first full year as a starter, they're in an AFC title game. Like, there's a clear difference there in terms of talent. And, you know, we can talk about, well, the Eagles aren't a quarterback away. Nobody thought the Bengals were a quarterback away. And you could argue the Bengals are still being hamstrung by a poor coach, by an awful offensive line. An elite quarterback can cure a lot of those ills. Now, those guys don't just fall off of trees. Those are hard to get. If it was easy, everybody would get one. And so you have to start looking at who would you replace Jalen Hurts with. I hate the Josh Allen comparison for a lot of reasons that you guys already hit on, but there's two main issues here. One is that Josh Allen is an outlier. Quarterbacks don't do what Josh Allen did. That's like looking at Tom Brady and coming away with the conclusion you should never draft a quarterback before day 3 because the greatest quarterback of all time was a 6th-round pick. You don't.
It's like Peyton Manning's rookie year too.
Yeah, you don't base your philosophy around outliers. And secondly, Josh Allen was a 2-year starter at Wyoming. Jalen Hurts spent 5 years at a Division I level at either Alabama, the best program in the country, or Oklahoma, a program you could argue is the best at developing quarterbacks in the country. He was also the son of a coach. Like, this guy has had elite coaching all the way through. I think Jalen Hurts, for all of his work ethic, and as much as you love the guy, he is much closer to his ceiling than people want to admit. I don't think Hurts gets much better than he is right now. And so Can you win with a quarterback in that 15 to 20 range? You can. Is it a lot harder? It is. And so to me, there's not a quarterback I want to leverage a lot for in this draft. I can promise you if Malik Willis was there in the second round, I'm taking him without even thinking about it, though, because he is that type of guy in that Allen mold that, he was a starter at Liberty. He hasn't had the best coaching. He's got ungodly athleticism and physical traits. You're buying a lottery ticket at a low cost and hoping it cashes. And so I think Hurts has earned the right to be the starter next year. I think the Eagles will have to upgrade at some point, but you never know. Maybe he takes the leap next year. So I'm not looking at quarterback as a huge need this offseason, but I do think it will be down the road.
Is Willis your number one QB right now in the draft? Is he the guy you're most interested in?
No, but there's nobody really that I want to trade up for. And I think you'd have to package picks to get up and get a guy like Kenny Pickett. And I think there's a chance you could get Willis as more of a low-cost investment. And so I wouldn't say Willis is my number one, but he's a guy that's intriguing to me that you could maybe get a good value on.
You heard it here first. There will be, or not here first, people have said it, but I'll say it and I'll guarantee it right now. You will see 4 quarterbacks go in the first round of this draft. People love to talk about how this is a down year, and people love to talk about there's no number one guy. I can guarantee you Pickett ends up going in the first round. I can guarantee you Corral ends up going in the first round. And then I think 2 of, Carson Strong, Sam Howell, Malik Willis end up going in, maybe even Desmond Ridder. Maybe he rises up. He really disappointed me in the college football playoff, but 2 of those 4 guys will end up going as well. There will be 4 first-round quarterbacks. So I kind of think Malik Willis would be maybe something they have to think about at 19. Maybe something they'd have to think about trading back a little bit into the 20s for. I got to tell you, and maybe I'd like to say I'm probably the most positive guy on Hurts here. I probably, but I'm probably also the one that's the most into maybe moving up to go get a Kenny Pickett, because I think Kenny Pickett is the guy that, or it could be the guy that Shane just talked about in Joe Burrow. I really do think that there is a lot of comparisons to be drawn to Kenny Pickett's last season at Pitt and then Joe Burrow's last season at LSU. The difference is Kenny Pickett didn't have Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and 7 guys on defense on the best college football team of all time with Joe Brady calling plays. He was on Pittsburgh with Pat Narduzzi and, a decent ACC team. But Kenny Pickett he's a 4 or 5 year starter. I think it was like 4.5 year starter who it didn't look like was going to be a day 1 or 2 draft pick. Just like Joe Burrow going into his senior year, it was like, maybe a 5th, 6th round pick. And then they come out and they light the league on fire and they don't throw picks. Even Kenny Pickett in his first 4 years, the dude didn't throw picks. He's just an NFL ready, smart IQ guy. And I'm really starting to talk myself into, maybe 16, 19, maybe you throw in a 3rd, or maybe 16, 19 and Hurts. And you get up there and you get into the top 5 and you take Pickett. I'm starting to warm up to the idea.
So Mark is going to be gutted live on air during the draft show when the Washington football team takes Pickett at 11.
That would scare me.
I like Pickett. I like him. I fully agree, Mark. I think that's the only like scenario for the Eagles that I would make a move is Kenny Pickett. I think the vast kind of takeaway of the second half of this past Eagles season was how good Devontae would be with a quarterback that can get the ball to him down the field, get the ball to him in stride, in space. Devontae Smith was terrific this season, and I like that pairing with Pickett and Devontae Smith, because one thing that Pickett is so good at watching tape is his ability to roll out of the pocket, keep his eyes down the field, improvise, and be accurate with his receivers. That's something that Hurts truly struggled. You saw it constantly. Hurts put his head down and just run. For Pickett, that guy can do both. And I think Pickett is the arm strength is there. The IQ is there. He's an RPO kind of dude that's, underratedly, like sneakily athletic. Mm-hmm. That was also surprising when I did my scouting report on him. So Pickett's the only guy for me that I would say would be an automatic upgrade over Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying he's good. I don't know if he's Joe Burrow. I don't know if he has that ceiling for me. But in terms of like an upgrade at the position, I definitely would think really hard about that one.
So I don't know if one of you could. I know this isn't a quarterback or an NFL draft show.
Yeah, we're gonna have to roll on here.
But if one of you have that Pickett fake slide anywhere on Twitter, I know Dives might have some clips. If you can pull that up for anyone who hasn't seen it,
amazing. Change the game.
Kenny Pickett's that play alone, and I know this is going to sound dumb. Like, I liked Kenny Pickett at that point as a draft prospect. I had watched him a lot. I had, I had already made him my number one guy in the class, but him and Carson Strong were still neck and neck to me at that point. When he had the football IQ to make this play, it really made me start thinking a little differently about him and his experience and how long he's been playing. And that's football genius to me. Like, I know that you can say, like, oh, he broke the rules, and that rule, they changed it immediately, and it's taking advantage of protecting the quarterback. Whatever. That's genius. Like, to have the thought to do that in the open field when you're going one-on-one against a guy to take advantage of a rule like that, that immediately made me start thinking about him on a different level in terms of his football IQ, and his lack of interceptions and lack of turnovers kind of back that up as well. But the other guy that you could talk me into is Carson Strong, but that's a project, and we'll get into that more in the future. But Kenny Pickett is, in terms of all the options that all the routes they could go at quarterback, of Russell Wilson, even like people want to talk about Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr or any of these guys that could be available. Kenny Pickett, to me, is the most interesting one because it's the most long-term option.
All right. We're going to roll on here. Pedro chiming in on YouTube says, "What's up, TPL?" Says, "The impression I have is that Hurts' problems remain the same that he's been struggling with since college." That's true. And, I mean, I think that's true for most guys. You don't become a different player. He's made some strides. I just think he's closer to his ceiling than we want to admit. So let's roll on to running back here, and we'll talk about these quite a bit more abbreviated than quarterback. But so the Eagles have a stable of running backs here, and Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell. Sanders had 754 yards on the year, 5.5 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns, which is just a mind-blowing stat. Boston Scott had 373 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns. Jordan Howard, 406 yards, 4.7 yards per attempt, and 3 touchdowns. And then Kenny Gainwell had 291 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, and 5 touchdowns. Mark, we'll start with you here. Briefly, what do you make of this running back group, and how do you view this as a need going forward?
What I make of it is that it stinks. It's not a very good running back group, even though they were the number one rushing offense. I think that had a lot to do with the fact that they were an offensive line that was top 3 in football and top 1 in rushing O-line stats. And then you look at the fact that they completely committed to an identity of having Jalen Hurts as your quarterback, which means you look at back to the RG3 days. You look at all these young running quarterbacks. The running game is always going to benefit. Obviously, this was on a different level since we were the number one offense, but I think Jalen Hurts being our number one rusher says a lot, and it says that all these guys were replaceable throughout the year, and all these guys had different roles throughout the year. Kenny Gainwell went from being important to never used to important to never used, and they just seemed to, whoever was available is what they used, and it seemed to work most of the time. So I don't think Miles Sanders is a guy that I would even think about paying long-term. Boston Scott is a backup. He's a career backup. He kills the Giants. Maybe we should keep him around forever for that. Gainwell can be exciting. I don't think he's a real legit option beyond being a third down back who I'd like to see more in terms of catching the ball. But and then Jordan Howard's, he's a backup as well. So if they want to commit to being a Jalen Hurts team, at least for next year, they want to commit to being able to run the ball, they need to use a little bit of draft capital to get a running back. And that's not something you'll hear me say often, but I'd like to see a day 2 pick on running back for sure.
Yeah, Sanders is not a guy that I think you give a second contract to. He will be on the final year of his deal next year. Boston Scott is a free agent right now. And as much as I like Kenny Gainwell, I mean, the consistency and usage wasn't there. I think this is definitely a need. And I'm of the opinion you should be taking a running back day 2 or day 3 nearly every draft just to cycle guys in. I view running back as probably the second most important need on this offense right now.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I guess I agree.
No, I fully agree. We did our offensive rankings where we tiered every single play on this Eagles offense, and you look at this, how good this Eagles rushing attack was this past year. I don't think we had anybody in that. I think we had Kenny Gainwell in the B range. Outside of that, like Boobie Miles, it's time to move on. I agree, Shane. Isaiah Spiller is a really nice power back that would fit really well here for the Eagles on that day 2, day 3 range. This is that time frame, to give Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense kind of a running back to groom alongside Kenny Gainwell, who I thought, showed a lot of flashes, especially as a receiver. But they truly need that, north-south running back here, which there are times in this Eagles offense where Jordan Howard was so important, so critical to this Eagles offense. It's nauseating considering, he couldn't even find a team at all. So for me, running back is a major area of need. I wouldn't say like a first round area of need, but when you get into that round 3, round 4, round 5, big time need for the Philadelphia Eagles.
And just a couple names I wanted to throw out there because Isaiah Spiller is a great option. He's a power back. I think everyone's name that they're going to throw out there, if you were a casual college football fan this season, is going to be Kenneth Walker because he put up such crazy numbers at Michigan State and he was a Heisman candidate for much of the year. Kenneth Walker's interesting. Kenneth Walker could be really good, and you could squint your eyes and say, oh, why can't he be Jonathan Taylor? And, I wasn't a huge Jonathan Taylor guy in the draft, so I'm a little bit afraid to miss again here on Kenneth Walker since he's got so many of the similar traits as he did. But personally, the two guys I'm really looking at are Kyron Williams from Notre Dame. We mentioned it earlier because he's such a great blocking running back. He's probably the best blocking back in this class, and he's able to catch the ball, and he's obviously able to run between the tackles. But beyond that, my favorite guy outside of Kyron Williams, which I'm biased on, is Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. That's a guy to look into. He's really, really fun to watch. Obviously, he's in Chip Kelly's offense at UCLA, so they were running they were running the ball a lot, and it's a really conducive offense. 2 running backs, which we've seen in Oregon. He had so many good running backs, but you watch the tape, and this guy was different. He transferred from Michigan. This guy was like a huge high school recruit who he doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires too, which is another interesting thing. Like, this was the only year he really got a lot of work, and he was fantastic. So that's another guy I'd love to see. He's a guy you could probably talk me into being like a 3-down back too.
All right, moving on to wide receiver. The Eagles have Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, Jalen Reagor, Greg Ward. Group. Devontae Smith has a good year, 916 yards, 5 touchdowns. Quez Watkins came in number 2 in terms of receivers with 647 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Reagor at 299 with 2 touchdowns. And then you've got to go all the way down to Greg Ward with 95 yards and 3 touchdowns to find the Eagles' number 4 receiver. Greg Ward is a free agent this offseason. And so you essentially have the trio of Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, Jalen Reagor. I think Devontae Smith is a number 1 guy. He's a good receiver. I think his production is hurt by playing with Jalen Hurts and by playing in such a run-heavy offense. I think Quez Watkins is a perfectly good wide receiver 3. I think the Eagles need a wide receiver 2. They need an X receiver, and we'll talk about that more in our mailbag in just a little bit. But Jalen Reagor is going to be here next year, guys. He costs more money to cut than he does to keep. He might be inactive all year. I think he's going to be on this roster, but wide receiver, in my opinion, is the biggest need for the Eagles to upgrade on their offense this offseason.
I think it's the biggest need on the team overall, because I think that they have one legitimate starting receiver. And I do think that there's a chance they have to cut Reagor, but Shane is probably right in terms of the fact that I would probably bet on him being back. I'd say it's 60-40, but it's not, it doesn't, I think the cost is, what's the difference? Like 3-4 million next year. Shane,
I want to say I'd have to look it up again. I want to say it was between 7 and 8 million.
Oh,
difference
okay.
Keeping or cutting him.
I thought I saw
because he was a first-round pick, but I can't remember for sure. I'll look it up while you guys talk.
For some reason, I thought I saw 4 million, but yeah, the draft is where I would personally want to draft a receiver. I think it's funny because anytime you talk about drafting a receiver on the Eagles podcast or on Eagles Twitter, and they're like, "Oh, we drafted J-Jaw and Reagor and Devontae 3 straight years. We can't draft another one," and it's like, well, the J-Jaw and Reagor picks at this point to me are irrelevant because they aren't guys. They aren't the guys that, they're not starters. So those picks not working is irrelevant. It'd be like an NBA team being like, oh, we drafted 2 bad point guards, so we're never going to have a point guard again. It's like, that's pretty stupid. So you draft with what's available and what's on your roster currently, and they need a receiver. They need a Drake London. They need a Jameson Williams. And we'll get into another route that they could improve this position later on in the podcast with the mailbag. But I think the draft would be the way I'd personally prefer to try to attack this need, because I do think they need a long-term option to stick next there to Devontae, who will fit for the next 5-7 years or however long we'll keep both of them. But there's some other options as well, but it's 100% the biggest need we have for me.
Okay, so with a pre-June 1st release, he would have a dead cap of $7.8 million, which is a cap savings of negative $4.2 million. Post-June 1, his dead cap drops to $6 million for 22, $1.8 million for 23, which would be a negative 2.5 cap savings. So that's where you're at with Reagor.
So what's that? So you mean there's a $2.5 million?
So it would cut, if you cut him, you would have $2.5 million less in cap than if he's on your roster.
I could see that happening post June 1. Then that's the number I heard, I think, and I thought $4 million, but I could see that happening post June 1. But it definitely won't happen before June 1 for that reason that Shane just went through.
Yeah, I think the lesson learned over last weekend was just how big of a need it is for the Eagles to add, true talent, true playmaking to this Eagles offense on the outside. We talked a lot during our mock draft about Drake London, who is just a terrific fit with the Philadelphia Eagles. Devontae Smith, I think we're just scratching the surface of his potential moving forward. We didn't see him. There was bulk of times where he didn't even touch the ball. I want to see him more in the slot. I think you could add wide receivers here in this draft that can do both, play in the slot, be that X guy. Drake London can do all of those things. Treylon Burks is another guy that's built like a linebacker. He's not necessarily DJ Metcalf, but he is a guy that can go down the field and get the ball. And you've got Jalen Hurts, who struggles with accuracy down the field. You need a guy like Burks. You need a guy that can make a play on the ball like Drake London. So those are two big names that I love. And then you've got Jameson Williams. You've got Garrett Wilson, who's just a technician, kind of just like Devontae Smith. He can play slot, play on the outside, great route runner. So there's a lot of routes they can go, pun intended, here for the Eagles. Then again, you have Mike Williams in free agency. I don't know if Tampa Bay would ever get rid of him, but Chris Godwin is a guy that I would absolutely love to be added here to the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a third down receiver. Jalen Hurts might struggle getting the ball downfield, but shoring up, becoming like the best of the best in the NFL on third down would be a smart move. But the same kind of issue arises is that Jalen Hurts' struggle hitting that middle of the field, because that's where Chris Godwin is a master and just targeting that middle area of the field. And that's what Jalen Hurts needs to work on, no doubt about it. So there's a lot of routes. I think the general consensus is bring in a vet wide receiver, a number 2 guy, but I fully agree. Depending on how the board falls, if Burks is there, if London is there, the list goes on and on. That round 1, round 2 area, that is definitely a major area for the Eagles to target as wide receiver.
David Bell too, but I don't think we're going to talk a lot about tight end. I think that's going to be a pretty cool
I think that's an underrated need for the Eagles, is a guy that can come in and make plays on the ball. I think they just need to get playmakers, period.
Yeah, so you've got Dallas Goedert, who had 830 yards and 4 touchdowns on the year. And then after that, you've got Tyree Jackson, who looked good but has just been hurt twice, and you've got Jack Stoll. And so I agree. I think tight end is something you could look at on day 2. If they're going to be committed to being such a run-heavy team, I wouldn't mind at all getting a second tight end here.
Yeah, I think day 2 might be a little early, and I don't think it's a strength in the draft, really. There's not a ton of tight ends in this class. I think that would be something maybe you address in free agency. You bring in a veteran, backup tight end or a second tight end in case Goddard does get hurt, which he has gotten hurt in the past. So I would understand that. But I was just going to point out, for a long time, I think a lot of people love to say, playmaker, like receivers are a little overrated. And you see, there was always the list. It was like, look at the highest paid receiver on each team that won the Super Bowl. It's like, take a look around last weekend and tell me Deebo Samuel wasn't important for the Niners. You had Devontae on the Packers. You had Kupp on the Rams. You have obviously Tyreek and Kelsey on the Chiefs. You had Davis and Diggs on the Bills, and the list keeps going on and on. And receiver is one of the most important positions in the sport, and I think that you're seeing that more now.
All right. Let's move on to the offensive line. And so on the offensive line, obviously Brandon Brooks announcing his retirement yesterday, and we're going to get into the implications of that in our mailbag. But as of right now, assuming Jason Kelsey comes back, I think your starting line next year from left to right would be Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Jason Kelsey, Isaac Seumalo, and Lane Johnson, which everybody would say is an elite group. If Kelsey leaves, then things start to get dicey. In my opinion, you put Seumalo at center then, and you're going to be starting Driscoll at right guard, a place he has played. Seumalo was drafted to be a center. And I know a while back, Jason Kelsey said that whenever he was gone, he said that he thought Seumalo would be pro center. So I just don't think you can move Landon Dickerson from left guard after how well he played. You want to keep him there, keep him next to guys like Peta, Nate a free agent, technically, so is Jason Kelsey. This group, how big of a need is the offensive line here? What do you kind of see going?
I think we lost you there for a second, Shane. But in terms of O-line, the starting O-line, to me, if Kelsey comes back, I don't see O-line as huge of a need as I think most people do. And it seems like most mock drafts have us taking at least one O-lineman in the first round. And we've gotten into this ad nauseum, I feel like, at this point on this show. But to me, it's the fact that we do have Jeff Stoutland, and we've seen what happened with Mailata, even Dickerson in the second round. Opito was perfectly acceptable this year. Seumalo we got on a discount before. Obviously, Lane Johnson was a high pick, so that's one example. But I think with Stoutland and with the success we've had kind of developing O-linemen and the success we've had even with backup O-linemen, I wouldn't want to use one of these 3 picks on O-line because I think that's there's so much strength. There's so much weaknesses elsewhere on this team that are more glaring. But that's just where I'm at with the O-line. I don't see it as quite as big of a need as a lot of the other positions we have to hit on.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, Mark. Like, you have Jeff Stoutland, the best coach on the Philadelphia Eagles. You have a guy that has a history of developing, guys, to their above and beyond their potential, no doubt about it. But I look at Tyler Linderbaum. I look at even Kenyon Green, who is a guy who has a ton of versatility on that interior offensive line, has played tackle. If you're rolling with Jalen Hurts, at the end of the day, it's keeping him upright. Even though we gave him a clean pocket here in the playoffs, he didn't use it. But at the end of the day, it is about, giving your quarterback the most amount of time possible in that pocket. And Jalen Hurts needs to make that next stride in that pocket. That's truly kind of the mark of his next step, becoming an NFL quarterback. So for me, I think it is a major need. I definitely think you get a guy that can be, a 10-plus year All-Pro like Tyler Linderbaum would be a no-brainer for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I agree, there's a lot of needs, but the truth is there's a lot of positions to fill. But the truth is, like, they're not going to fill it in this draft. You're going to just – that's the honest truth. Is you look at the Chiefs, you look at the Bills, like, these teams are just amazing. They've got so much talent. I want stars. The Eagles need to find stars. And if that's Tyler Linderbaum, then so be it. So for me, depending on how the board falls, this is a high position of need, especially keeping Jalen Hurts healthy. And I think if Linderbaum is there, you do it, no questions asked.
We got Pedro chiming in on YouTube, says that Tyree Jackson had successful ACL reconstruction surgery today. So, hopefully he can be back into training camp, and I guess that's a little early, but hopefully he can be back near the beginning of the year. And he's a guy that looked good, just had poor injury luck this year.
Yeah.
Okay, let's roll on. We're going to set the Eagles talk aside for a moment. We'll be back to a mailbag in a little bit. And we're going to talk about the divisional playoff games. 4 games played last weekend. All 4 of them had their outcome changed on the final play of the game in regulation. It's just a crazy weekend of football. So we're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals traveling to Tennessee, and they walk out of there with a win over the Titans, 19-16. Rookie kicker Evan Mcpherson hit a 52-yard field goal on the last play of the game. He was 4 of 4 on field goals on the day, including 2 of 50-plus yards. He became the first kicker with multiple 4 field goal games in the same postseason, which is crazy. My favorite thing is after the game, it came out that he said on the sideline before taking the field to attempt the 52-yard kick, he looked at the backup quarterback, who's his holder, and he said, well, I guess we're going to the AFC Championship game, which is just – you love that kind of swagger from your kicker, I guess. So, Mark, what did you take away from this game?
I think that the takeaway is that if the Tennessee Titans want to be taken seriously and if the Tennessee Titans want to be a legitimate contender, they can't do it with Ryan Tannehill. And I know that all of that stuff I just said about San Fran, about the 49ers, Jimmy G, and about that tier of quarterbacks and how some teams have shown that you can win with them. But, the Titans have enough talent with Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown and Julio Jones and a lot of the guys they have on defense, and they have a good enough head coach to do it. At this point, the only thing that's holding them back is the quarterback position. And I see them in a very similar spot to kind of where the Rams were before this year, where they kind of have to, at this point, go make a move and go get a guy, whether that be them making a move in the draft or that be, trying to make a play for Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or Derek Carr. I don't know what Tennessee does necessarily, but I think that's the number one takeaway I had from this game. Obviously, we'll talk about the Bengals a little bit more in the preview, but the Titans had a lot of ways they could have won this game. It was 16-6 Bengals at one point. And it's like, okay, the Bengals are going to pull away. This is the game. Tennessee got right back in it. Tannehill did throw that one dart to A.J. Brown, one of the best throws I've ever seen him make. And they get right back in it. They tie it. And they even have the ball with, I forget, about a minute left. And then Tannehill throws an interception, which allows Cincy basically
the perfect bookends of the game. The first and the last play from scrimmage for the Titans were Ryan Tannehill interceptions. So they just started slow. They had 8 first downs on the first 6 drives of the game. Derrick Henry, 20 carries for 62 yards, just didn't make much of an impact. The defense did what they were supposed to do. Like, they were constantly after Joe Burrow. He was sacked 9 times. It's tied for the most in postseason history. And I've got a bone to pick with Zach Taylor on that. Like, Joe Burrow was pressured on 33% of his dropbacks, and they only kept an extra guy in to block on 9 of 46 dropbacks. Like, that's just asinine. That's just asking your quarterback to get killed. I don't get it. I am not a Zach Taylor guy. I think as good as the Bengals are, they'd be so much better if they had a better coach. But, I mean, the results speak for themselves. Burrow throws for 348 yards. Despite being pressured on 33% of his dropbacks. Like, he's an elite quarterback talent, and he's a guy you win because of, and he's able to overcome some of these probably non-ideal coaching decisions. And the Bengals find themselves in the AFC title game 2 years after they picked number 1 overall. It's the first time that a quarterback has been drafted number 1 overall and gone to the conference title game in his first 2 seasons. So it's just a phenomenal turnaround here for the Bengals.
I will say that a little bit of the turnaround in terms of the success in the playoffs is based on their opponents. I think they've scored 3 touchdowns and kicked 8 field goals so far in the playoffs. And I do think that they got a little bit of a gift in playing the Raiders, who had overachieved their way to get there. And then also getting to play, in my opinion, I said it before the game, the worst 1 seed that I can remember, the most vulnerable 1 seed that I can remember.
I was going to ask if the Titans are the worst 1 seed in NFL history.
Yeah, I said it, I think, on our preview show. I said that I had no belief in that Titans team. Yeah, exactly. Tannehill's a regular QB, period. Bengals won with Burrow being sacked 9 times. And yeah, Burrow's a tough guy, man. I mean, that to stand in the pocket and to make the throws he needed to make to get down the field, even at the end. It's incredibly impressive after how bad his O-line was for him all game. It's hard to say too much about this game other than since he got really lucky that Tannehill played so poorly. And, it's a shame kind of that since he loses next week, gets blown out or loses handily, it'll still get looked at like, oh, they had a better year than Buffalo. And it's like, oh, well, it's just how the seeding broke. Like Buffalo got to face Kansas City earlier. But I don't want to take anything away from Joe Burrow or Cincinnati. As you know, I'm a huge Joe Burrow guy. I'm enjoying this Bengals run more than anyone. I bet on them both weeks. I have a Bengals plus 800 future to win the AFC, which I gave out before the playoffs here. So I hope people out there took it. So, the Bengals have impressed me for sure. But like you said, Zach Taylor's not a great coach. The O-line has some serious problems. That is still a really flawed team that Joe Burrow and the defense has done a really good job for the Bengals at causing turnovers and making big plays in big moments.
Jamar Chase had 5 catches in this game for 109 yards, 95 of which came after the catch. So, yeah, they was trying to get the ball out quick. It wasn't pushing it downfield because they just did not have time. But the Bengals will be up against the Chiefs, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Your buddy Joe Ciccoletti chimes in and says, get your popcorn ready. Will Shane continue to disrespect Kyle Shanahan, especially this week since he is an underdog again, which brings a perfect segue into the 49ers going to Lambeau Field. They beat the Packers 13-10. San Francisco wins without scoring an offensive touchdown. So, yes, I will continue to disrespect Kyle Shanahan. His special teams unit outscored his offense. And so, but no, this was a phenomenal game. Not as exciting of a brand of football as what we watched with the Bills and the Chiefs and their shootout, but just a defensive slugfest. And, again, Robbie Gould hits a 45-yard field goal in the last play of the game to win it. So both of these games decided on a last-second field goal. Aaron Rodgers drops to 0-4 against the 49ers in the playoffs. He becomes the only quarterback in NFL history to lose 4 postseason starts to a single opponent, which is just another fun stat for Aaron Rodgers. So what'd you take out of this game?
Yeah, they say it's hard to win in Green Bay, but somehow over the last 20 years, they have the most home playoff losses in the NFL.
Maybe they were talking about Green Bay.
Yeah, it's hard for Green Bay to win in Green Bay. And it's funny because everyone all week was saying, oh, the weather's going to be so bad and it's going to, and San Fran's not going to be able to win. And all week I was kind of like, isn't the weather being bad kind of helpful to San Fran? And isn't San Fran the team that's less reliant on throwing the ball and less reliant on the weather being okay? And I think if that game's played in the Dome, Green Bay probably wins it. But the fact that it was played at Green Bay actually hurt Green Bay. And San Fran was the more physical team, and they ran the ball down their throat. And I thought that, the play calling at the end of the game to get them down the field for that field goal was impressive. And I thought that, trusting Deebo Samuel the way that they do in the backfield on that third down to get down the field was impressive. But it was a great job by D'Amico Ryans, the defensive coordinator, and the defense in general against Green Bay for sure. But I think that game was a classic grinded out, Shanahan type win. I know that the offense didn't play well, but they got down and got 2 field goals. And obviously that blocked punt was absolutely huge.
I don't understand guys like Vic Fangio and Matt Eberflus getting head coaching looks while D'Amico Ryans is getting nothing really. I mean, his defense is winning games for the 49ers and in impressive fashion against the Cowboys and the Packers. Those are the top 2 offenses, I believe. I can't remember if it was DVOA or points per game or whatever, but hot offenses, they beat them in back-to-back weeks and they make them look bad. It's just D'Amico Ryans has done a phenomenal job with this 49ers defense. I think he deserves a lot more credit than he's getting. Also, to your point about the dome, like this is why the Bills should be putting a dome on their stadium now. Like if you're a team that does not have a dome and you often have cold weather or snow in the playoffs and you've got a young quarterback, and you're going to have a passing offense, put a dome on your stadium. Like, you can talk about being used to the conditions for Green Bay, but it doesn't matter if you're used to them when the other team comes in and they just don't throw the ball anyways. And so you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. Green Bay should have had a dome a long time ago. The Bills should have a dome right now to make the most of Josh Allen. But Deebo Samuel, he didn't have the most productive game, but he did ice the game. And it's mind-blowing to me still. 3rd and 7 with a little over a minute left. And your play call is to hand the ball off to a hobbled Deebo, and he picks up the first down. Like, there's so little confidence in Jimmy Garoppolo. And I can't say that I blame them. Like, Jimmy G just has not been playing well. But you wonder how long they can keep that up. We've talked about with the Eagles that you're going to not have a really good quarterback. Everything else has to be perfect. And you wonder how long the DeMeco Ryans defense can continue, to play at this level. Are they going to be able to do this next week? Are they going to be able to do it in a Super Bowl? And I guess we'll just have to wait and find out.
Yeah, but they did, San Fran has won these 2 games without even playing that well outside of Jimmy G. I felt like their rushing offense hasn't been, next level. There's about 3.5 yards per carry. And then Debo only had 83 yards in this game total. Kittle only had 63 yards in this game. Brandon Ayuk, I don't even believe, had a catch in this game. So San Fran has won these games without playing all that well, which I think says a lot.
On offense, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But even outside of quarterback, though, even like running the football,
right.
but they've been able to do it in the moments that matter, and they've been able to do it in the end of the game, and that's been incredibly impressive. And Kyle Shanahan didn't. There was a lot of coaches that made decisions to lose games this weekend in close games, and Kyle Shanahan did a great job staying in that game against Green Bay when I think a lot of other head coaches would have kind of just started throwing the ball every down and would have just started going crazy and taking shots and feeling like they were out of it when it was 7-0 and then 10. I think it was 10-0. And then all that, I think a lot of coaches would have made a mistake there, but they stuck to their plan and they stuck to what they were, which was a running team. And even though it didn't, 27 carries here for 102 yards for Mitchell and Samuel. But it didn't end up mattering because they got that play on special teams. And then, I think that the big momentum shifter in this game before we move on to the next game was Mason Crosby missing the field goal before halftime that would have made it 13-3 instead of 10-3. And it's so funny because for the last 4 years, I've been saying Mason Crosby's cooked, and I feel like he's missed an important kick for 4 straight years now. So it's on them for that. They just I get he's a legend or whatever, but he shouldn't be that much of a legend. They've won 1 Super Bowl and I don't know however long, but they need to get a new kicker too. But there's a lot more concerns than that in Green Bay.
Yeah, major concerns about how the Aaron Rodgers thing is going to play out. But special teams are right up there. Special teams essentially lost them this game.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, the Los Angeles Rams traveled to Tampa Bay and won in blowout fashion for a little bit. And then it came back to be a crazy finish. They win 30-27. The Rams scored to go up 26-3. And everybody started joking about they should go for 2 to get 28-3 to meme Tom Brady, blah, blah, blah. Well, apparently you can't even joke about that. You don't mention it because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers stormed back 24 unanswered points to tie the game. The Rams lost 4 fumbles in this game, and it all culminates with just a mind-blowingly stupid decision by Todd Bowles. He just can't help himself to blitz in these situations, but he blitzes out of the slot, which left Antoine Winfield one-on-one with Cooper Kupp on an over route. After the game, Matthew Stafford said that he and Cooper Kupp have named that over route for the love of the game route because it's not even in the progression. It's just running the coverage off to open stuff up underneath. But as soon as Stafford saw that blitz coming and he saw Winfield, he said he knew he was taking the ball to Kupp and he knew Kupp would get open. And he does. And it's just an improbable, sets up the field goal to win the game, of course, on the last play of the game. But Kupp ends this game with 9 receptions for 183 yards and a touchdown. He now has 12 100-plus yard games this season, which ties Michael Irving's record for the most in a season. So he's going to have a chance to break that record this weekend. What did you take out of this one?
I was going to save this for next game, but since we're talking so much about Kupp, and I think we have to, who's more important to their team, Cooper Kupp or Deebo Samuel?
Probably, I got to say Deebo Samuel. Because it's
so close, yeah.
At least the Rams still have OBJ as a number 2. Obviously, you got George Kittle, but Deebo doesn't just, he's not just a receiver. He plays running back. He does everything. So,
yeah, it's tough. But these 2 guys are making their argument for being top 3 receivers in the league. I think you kind of have to put Deebo and Cooper Kupp into that conversation with how versatile Deebo is, and then with how incredible this Cooper Kupp season is. It's historic. So I'm starting to be willing to put these guys past people like Devontae Adams, which sounds insane. But I think the three scariest receivers to me right now in the NFL, and maybe I'm saying this, it's a little biased because they're all three available and all three still playing. But Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, and Tyreek Hill in no order, to me, are the three scariest receivers in football, even above Devontae or Hopkins or, maybe even I didn't think about Jamar Chase. You could probably throw him in there. Maybe Justin Jefferson. My take here is a lot of good receivers, but you can't even joke about the fact the Rams tried to lose this game. The Rams tried everything they could to lose this game. The 4 missed fumbles, the missed kick by Matt Gay, who has some sort of demon in Tampa Bay. That guy can't kick in the Bucs Stadium, especially going into that one end zone. That one stat, I forget what the stat is, but that stat was insane. I could not believe my eyes. This was the one game this weekend I didn't bet. I went 4-0 on the NFL in bets, if you listened last week, and I gave all 4 of those out. But this was the game I was like, you know what? Like, I'll be rooting for the Rams. Like, I have a future on the Rams to win the Super Bowl. I can't bet against Brady again. I've done it too many times, and I can't bet against Aaron Donald. And they have the Rams had the pieces to go against Tom Brady. Just like, anyone, it's the old adage, you got to get him pressure up the middle, and they have Aaron Donald and they have the pass rush to do it. And that's exactly what they did. So I was too afraid to bet this on either side, but I was, you would have thought I had a $1 million wager on this game if you would have been a fly on the wall watching me watch the Rams collapse. And I was just like, how is this happening? The one snap that went like next to Stafford's head, that's something anytime I think about this game and like the almost meltdown, that will be the moment that always snaps into my head. Like the Rams get a fumble. It feels like the end of the game. I think they were up a touchdown at that point, or maybe up 2 touchdowns. I can't remember. They get a fumble, and it's like, all right, exhale. The Rams are okay. And then the first play they have the ball snapped by Stafford's head, and I was like, oh, my God, this is just a nightmare if you're a Rams fan. Good thing there are no Rams fans, I guess. But
yeah, watching this game, it was just Tristan Wirfs unable to play, and Brady was just under duress all day. Von Miller had 9 pressures, 1 sack. He had a 22.5% pressure percentage. It made me realize just how incredible the Eagles' offensive line depth is. Losing 1 tackle, and I know the Buccaneers have lost a lot of players, a lot of receivers and things, but the difference was losing Tristan Wirfs, and it just totally collapsed their offensive line. And so it does give you some respect for what Stoutland's been able to do with that Eagles offensive line, and it seems like they're able to shuffle pieces in and out without even missing a beat. So just the Eagles connection I thought of while I was watching that game.
And props to Raheem Morris for taking advantage of their missing spots in the offensive line. They were moving Donald around. They were moving Von Miller around. They were showing during the game that the Rams were giving all types of different looks on that defensive line, and that front 7 blitzing in general, which was confusing the Bucs O-line a lot. So, Raheem Morris, another guy, another young defensive coordinator. He obviously was a head coach before in Tampa Bay, but another guy that should probably be getting looks if any defensive coordinators are going to be getting looks with how good of a job Raheem Morris has done. And they haven't really skipped a beat without Brandon Staley.
Yeah. All right, huge news, breaking news here from Joe on YouTube says that Jeff Fisher is back to head coaching. He was hired by the Michigan Panthers of the USFL, and so they can already go ahead and notch in a 7-9 season. So
that's great.
Fisher back to coach. All right, let's roll on to the last game, the craziest game of the weekend, the only one that did not end in regulation. The Buffalo Bills traveled to Kansas City, and they lose 36-42 in overtime. This game was just insane. Like, when Buffalo scored on a 4th and 13 with 1:54 left to take the lead, I was afraid they left too much time for Patrick Mahomes. 52 seconds later, when the Chiefs scored with 1:02 left, I worried they left too much time for Allen. Now, when Josh Allen scored with 13 seconds left, I was talking to my mom, and she was rooting for the Chiefs big time. And she was all down because, the Bills were going to win. And I jokingly said, hey, you never know what could happen. It turns out we never knew what could happen. 13 seconds and they get into field goal range. Kansas City gives up 2 go-ahead touchdowns in the final 2 minutes of this game. And somehow they still won. This was the first game in playoff history with 3 go-ahead touchdowns in the last 2 minutes. And I was especially mad during this game because I took the money line for all 4 underdogs over the weekend. So I had a good weekend, but I also just put a 1-unit parlay on all 4 money lines that would have paid out 38.5 units. And I missed it because of this game, because of that 13 seconds. So I cursed Patrick Mahomes for that would have been the best bet that I've ever made, a 38.5 unit parlay. And I missed it on the last leg, but just a crazy game. Mark, I don't even know where to start with this one. You start us off.
It's the greatest game ever played. And people can come at me with 28-3. People can come at me with our Super Bowl. Well, our Super Bowl, you're going to say. Yeah, I think
I'm biased.
Yeah, it's our favorite. It's my favorite, too. My favorite actually might be against the Vikings in the NFC Championship. I might have even enjoyed that more than the Super Bowl. But, I think that just like a non-Eagles game, I can't ever remember thinking that there was a better game than that. And so just like a fun little story, I had the over. I had over I think 53.5 over 54, something like that. And it was 26-21 with a minute 50 whatever seconds left. 26-21, 4th down for the Bills. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, this over is not going to hit. Yeah, it was 54.5. So I needed a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. Bills are down 5. And I'm like, man, it's 4th down. The Chiefs are going to get stopped, and then they're going to run out the clock, and the Chiefs are going to win 26-21. And I'm like, oh, this sucks. That over was the right bet, and it's not going to hit. And then the Bills obviously score on 4th down there, and I'm like, okay, I'm rooting for the Chiefs because I had the Chiefs spread, but I had the over too. And I'm like, I kind of need this 2-point conversion though. So then the Bills get the 2-point conversion. They cash the over, and I'm like, all right. I'm rooting for the Chiefs. I get to put the over aside. They hit already. I'll root for the Chiefs. And then obviously the Chiefs score. I go nuts. The Bills score. I'm all sad. 13 seconds left. I'm talking to my friends. I'm like, oh, this game's over. Everyone's going to come at Patrick Mahomes and say, he didn't win enough this year, even though he put up everything he could in this game. Wasn't to be. 13 seconds.
Did you hear what happened on the play that got him into field goal range?
Yep. Travis Kelsey ran a route that was not at all in the play. And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to run towards the open space because I believe Buffalo called a timeout. Kansas City ran out for a play. And so pretty stupid to do that for Buffalo to call a timeout, I guess, because Kansas City was able to look at it. Mahomes and Kelsey looked at it, and Kelsey came back and said, I'm going to run to the open area if they come back with the same coverage they were just showing. And then they came back with the same coverage, and you can hear it. Mahomes goes, do it, Kelsey.
Do it. Yeah, just crazy. The chemistry between those two guys. Feel bad for Gabriel Davis in this game. Oh. Dude, he has never had a 600-yard season. He has 13 career touchdowns, and he has 201 yards and 4 touchdowns in this game, and he doesn't even get to celebrate it in a victory. But yeah, the AFC is going to be so much fun over the next 4 years, or the next few years. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence. Like, it's just an insane cast of young quarterbacks. And I was thinking about that. Like, I don't even know if the NFC has a young quarterback on that tier. I wasn't thinking of one off the top of my head. I obviously didn't go look, but
I mean, Dak doesn't count as young anymore, probably, but he's not. I guess he's not that much older than Mahomes and them. But I guess Dak is like the only one, but he's not even young. So yeah, it's Kyler, but I don't think he's on that level as well. So
yeah, and we saw what Dak did against the 49ers as Pedro chimes in there on YouTube.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Not a lot, but all right. Now I do have a bone to pick though. The NFL overtime rules are absolutely.
Here we go.
They have been for years. It's terrible. It is pathetic that game, the game of the year, game of the decade, I guess you could say game of the millennium, the last 22, I don't know. Best game I can remember. And it's just such an ungratifying ending. And you can say just go get a stop, but the reality is that game was decided by a coin toss. That coin lands on the other side. There's no doubt in my mind that Buffalo scores a touchdown. And ever since we changed the rules to you can't kick a field goal to win on the opening drive, there have been 11 overtime games in the playoffs. The team that won the coin toss has won 10 of those 11 games. And so we can say just go get a stop. The reality is that the NFL rules are slanted so much to favor offenses that the results speak for themselves. 10-1 for the team that wins the coin flip. It is a decided disadvantage. You are not going to win a playoff game if you don't win the coin toss in overtime. They've got to come up with some new system.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Like I think it's a lot. I think a lot of people are saying that rule change, and it's like, oh, since the rule change, and when people are saying rule change, it's looked at as a negative connotation. It's like, well, the rule change is still better than what they were doing before, where a field goal could win, because then a coin toss was really, really deciding what was going to happen. And you can look at a ton of these regular season overtime games where it seems like there's more ties than there is teams that score on the first drive a touchdown. And when it comes to overtime,
and to be clear, I'm fine with the regular season system. Fine with it being 10 minutes. Fine with it being a tie. I get,
make it 15.
Week. Yeah.
Make it 15.
Either way,
yeah.
I'm not concerned really about a tie in the regular season, but I think the postseason rules are just asinine. Joe Ciccoletti says that it's cost us 3 huge games the last 6 years: the Falcons Super Bowl, Chiefs versus Pats.
Pats, yeah.
What I meant. Yeah. And the Bills versus the Chiefs here. And then Pedro asks, is there any debate playoffs? I think it comes up every year. I think Ravens submitted a proposal last offseason that got voted down. I'm sure it's going to come here.
The Chiefs submitted the proposal after you're breaking up there a little, Shane, but the Chiefs submitted the proposal after they lost to the Patriots a couple of years ago, and it got denied. But it seems like the NFL always kind of overreacts to one thing that happens in the playoffs, and I think that'll be what this is, and I think that they'll change it, which is fine. I am a college football fan. I like college overtime personally. I don't like what they did with college overtime, making anything past third overtime like a 2-point conversion fest. I think that's a joke of a way to decide a football game. But yeah, I don't have a problem with the rule change, and I don't have a problem with people wanting the rules to change. My problem is that it dominated the conversation. My problem is that it became the main talking point from the game instead of the best game of all time, instead of 13 seconds needing needing 40 yards in 13 seconds and getting it. And then also needing to score in touchdown again at the end. I think a lot of people are taking a lot of credit away from Patrick Mahomes in this game, and a lot of people just like Josh Allen, and a lot of people just like the Bills, and a lot of people are just upset that the Bills lost. And I don't think that it would be nearly as much of a conversation than if the Bills got the ball first and went down and scored. And people would have brought it up. I think some people would have brought it up. I think there is a ton of Kansas City Chiefs fatigue and Patrick Mahomes fatigue going on that I didn't really realize was going on until they started struggling this year. And when they started struggling this year, when they were 3-4, the vultures were out saying the Chiefs era was over, and Patrick Mahomes was a system quarterback, and he was just there because of Hill and Kelsey and Andy Reid. And it's like, okay, now that he's back and people don't have that kind of stuff to lean on and say, I think people are just upset that he won, and people are upset that he keeps winning. And a little bit of it to me just feels like, if you're upset Patrick Mahomes keeps winning, and I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying this to a lot of other people on Twitter. I think if you're upset about Patrick Mahomes continuing to win, then you keep crying, because it's going to be a long career, because that guy is going to keep winning for the rest of his career. He's now 58-15. In his career. If he wins the Super Bowl, he'll be 60-15 in his first 75 career starts. That's the stuff we've never seen before. I mean, people just need to start respecting a little bit of what's going on with Patrick Mahomes. And even still, there's like Mahomes or Allen, like who's the better quarterback right now? And I like Josh Allen as much as anyone. I love Josh Allen. I think he's so fun. That's not a conversation. The Mahomes or Allen thing's not a conversation. Even if Buffalo would have won the game, it's not really a conversation for me. And maybe Allen outplayed him a little bit in that game. I think it was probably about even, however you want to slice it. They both played amazing. But it can't be a conversation until Allen has a sustained success that Mahomes has had. And I just don't think there's enough Mahomes respect going on.
Yeah. Okay. Let's roll on.
Long here.
Yeah, let's roll on. I'd love to react some more to some of that, but let's roll on to our Eagles mailbag. I put out a mailbag yesterday, and I got a few questions. I'm going to tie 2 of these together. Yeah. Somebody asked what the cap ramifications of Brandon Brooks retiring was, and then somebody else asked how his retirement impacts the draft. So let me address the cap ramifications real quick. When a player retires, it's real similar to just releasing a player. The prorated money that's been paid out stays on your cap. And so basically, Brooks would have counted $19.4 million on the 22 cap, and he had a $15.7 million dead money with his release and retirement. But they restructured it. They lowered his salary from 13.4 to 1.2, which is the vet minimum, which made his cap number $7 million. So post June 1st, when they officially retire him, that 1.2 million salary goes away. He'll have a dead cap hit of 5.9 million for 2022 and a dead cap of 9.8 million for 2023. And so basically the overall impact is a savings of $1 million for 22 and $6 million for 2023. So not a lot of cap implications there because of how they managed that. The bigger question is, how does it impact the draft? To me, it doesn't impact the draft at all unless Jason Kelsey retires, because I think if Jason Kelsey doesn't retire, I think you're shifting Isaac Seumalo to right guard. If Jason Kelsey does retire, I still think you've got a guy in Jack Driscoll who played well at right guard. So I don't think it impacts the draft at all. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I went in depth on the O-line thing, but if anyone, I haven't counted Brandon Brooks into our plans like the last 2 years now. I think you've had to kind of just look at him as a lottery. I think we talked about that in the preseason. He was just like, yeah, if he stays healthy, that'd be nice, but we're kind of just assuming he won't. We assumed that Dickerson would step into a role, and he did, and he did well. So this doesn't affect anything to me. Like I kind of figured this was coming, I guess, that we were either cutting him or that he was retiring.
All right. And then the other mailbag question I got was, who are some of the top wide receivers that you would target or you could see the Eagles targeting in free agency? So I'm going to throw some names out here, Mark. You can tell me what you think, and then you can add anybody that I miss. But I think one guy you could look at is Mike Williams from the Chargers. He just turned 27. According to Spot Track, he is projected to be worth a $16.3 million annual average value contract. He's got a lot of injury history. I think he's worth the risk. At 6'4", 220, I think he provides an X receiver for the Eagles, which is something they really need. What are your thoughts on Williams?
Yeah, copy paste all my thoughts from Drake London in terms of how Drake London would fit to Mike Williams. Mike Williams is what you hope Drake London. I guess you honestly you hope Drake London's like Mike Evans, which is even like another step from what Mike Williams is. But Mike Williams has shown his talent, especially since Justin Herbert has started playing. I imagine that I don't know the Chargers cap situation. I can't imagine they're going to let this guy walk, right? Like,
I think they're going to tag him, but
yeah.
We'll
I think when you have Herbert and Keenan Allen is aging at this point, and Austin Eckler is not like super young anymore. He's not a cost-controlled guy anymore. I do think that you kind of have to hold on to Mike Williams if you're the Chargers. But yeah, he's the perfect fit. I mean, he's the exact guy that we would want to bring in. If he's not tagged, I want to throw any type of money that we can at him.
All right, another guy would be DJ Chark from Jacksonville.
Wow.
He is 6'4", 200 pounds. 25 years old. Spot Track estimates a $12 million AAV for him. He's a guy that's got a lot of injury history, but he's got blazing speed. He's got the size to be an X. He's got the speed to be a deep threat. I think he would be also a good fit for the Eagles. Stretch the field vertically. He can win over the middle of the field. So I would not mind seeing DJ Chark in Eagles green.
He's someone I hadn't thought about. I'm a huge DJ Chark guy. I thought I was going to be negative. There's a couple big names that you're going to bring up that I'm going to surprise some people and throw some cold water on, I'm sure, that I'm not as interested in as most. But DJ Chark's a guy I like a lot. You look at 2019, he had 73 catches for 1,008 yards and 8 touchdowns with like Minshew, I think, pretty much at quarterback. So I think DJ Chark is very, very interesting, and he would be a lot more cost-controlled than any of these guys.
All right. I'll throw out a trio of names here. Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, and Michael Gallup. Godwin and Gallup both coming off of injuries. So obviously you're going to take concerns about that. These might be guys that would sign a one-year prove-it deal, although I don't know that anybody's signing a one-year prove-it deal with the Eagles because you're going to want to be in a high-volume offense to put up stats. So I don't think it's likely you could get a Godwin or a Gallup, but you might be able to get Allen Robinson. What are your thoughts on him?
So I was just going to say, I'll separate Gallup for a second and just say Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin. All three of them are going to be too expensive for what I think they provide. I think Devontae Adams is not as good as he's shown in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. He's great. He's a great receiver. I don't think he's the top 5 talent at the position that I think most people would think he is, and that his paycheck will dictate him to be this offseason. So Devontae's not a guy that I would want to go after. Chris Godwin, I think, is another guy who's been benefited by quarterback play in the offense that he's been in. And now that he has the injury risk, I wouldn't personally want to attach a high value to that. And I still think that teams will give him more than a 1-year deal. I think he is built up enough to get a bigger deal than I'd be comfortable giving him. And then Allen Robinson is a guy that this year was so weird. I am just so shocked by how bad he was this year. Coming into this year, he was I had him in a lot of fantasy leagues. I was really high on his upside with Justin Fields if Fields ever got a chance to play. They didn't connect at all. They used Mooney way more, and it was a weird season for Allen Robinson that makes me kind of nervous about the guy. It wasn't even really injury related either.
Yeah. Okay. We got Pedro chiming in here on YouTube. He says, do you think we should use the free cap on a wide receiver, or it totally depends on the draft? Well, the first wave of free agency will be before the draft. So you got to factor that in if you want one of those top guys. I want to do both. I think we've got the receiver room is so young. It's so critical to developing a quarterback. I want to see a vet receiver signed. It does not have to be a top guy you're paying $20 million a year, but I want a veteran presence in that room. So I want to see him sign a vet, and to be honest, I want to see him spend a day 1 or 2 pick on one as well.
Yeah, I'd agree there. And then I separated them, and then I didn't talk about him. Michael Gallup's a guy I'd be very interested in. That's a guy that I would have been really interested in before the injury, because I think he would have been plugged in and just a perfect fit. But I'm still interested.
Yeah. Okay, let me throw 2 more names at you that are a little bit off the radar here. So we've talked a lot about X receivers. Can I interest you in a slot receiver? Slot receiver, you might be able to get cheaper. I think Devonta Smith can win outside. He's shown he can win outside. I think it would be best if we could put him in the slot, but I think he can go outside. And so 2 other guys I'm interested in are Juju Smith-Schuster, who is injured. I don't think he takes a 1-year deal with the Eagles, again, because of volume, but Spot Track puts him in the $8 million range. Or a guy like Christian Kirk from Arizona. I think he could be a good weapon out of the slot, maybe let you get the most out of Devonta Smith and Quez Watkins. So are you interested at all in getting a slot receiver out of free agency?
So who are the names again besides Kirk?
Juju.
Yeah. If Juju was really cheap, I mean, he was cheap last year, right? He signed a 1-year, signed a 1-year, $7 million deal, and then he missed the whole year. So you could talk me into Juju for $4 or $5 million on a 1-year deal. I could be talked into that for sure. I don't think Christian Kirk's that good. I've never been a Christian Kirk guy. I don't have much to back that up. I've never been a huge Christian Kirk guy. I wasn't in his draft.
Okay. All right. And is there any other receivers in free agency you want to call out? That's all the ones I had jotted down. Is there anybody else you want to mention?
No, there's one that I saw that's not coming to my brain, but you hit on all the ones that I had in my brain besides that, and then DJ Chark I wasn't thinking about.
Yeah, I'm kind of low-key in love with the idea of bringing in Chark.
Yeah, bring in Chark and Juju. We won't even have to draft one.
There you go. All right, let's roll on to our conference title previews. We've only got 2 of these. We'll get through them a little quicker here because we're already an hour and 17 minutes into the show. But you guys haven't even noticed because you're so enamored with this top-level analysis and content. So let's start in the AFC. The Cincinnati Bengals traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs. In Week 17, these 2 teams faced one another. Cincinnati fell behind 14-0 and then rallied to win 34-31 on a game-winning field goal as time expired. I don't know if that sounds familiar to last weekend at all, a field goal with time expiring, but Joe Burrow was 30 of 39 for 446 yards and 4 touchdowns. Jamar Chase had 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. Both teams had 5 plays over 25 yards, but the Bengals didn't allow one in the second half. They did a great job adjusting to Kelsey and to Hill. I think this game comes down to, are Jesse Bates and Chidobe Awuzie up to that task again? Through 2 games in the playoffs, the Bengals have only allowed 35 points. Now, granted, it was against the Raiders and Titans. And so, I think this is a Chiefs team that's firing on all cylinders. I think this is a Bengals team that is struggling to score in the red zone. And for that reason, I got to go with the Chiefs here. I don't think the Bengals are going to be able to keep pace. I know they just beat them a month ago. I think it was different circumstances on your home field, and playoff Patrick Mahomes is a whole different animal.
That he is. So again, like I said it earlier, I have Bengals plus 800 to win the AFC. So technically I have Bengals plus 800 to win this game, which is a pretty good value considering they're somewhere in the 220, 230 range plus. So I, this is a weird spot for me. I can't ever remember rooting against Patrick Mahomes. I've always said, I've never bet against Patrick Mahomes in a game. I guess this is kind of the first time I have, but it's not, I didn't really mean to when I did it, but here, that's where we're at. I think the Chiefs win this game. It's really hard for me to talk myself into the Bengals with the way that they're playing so far, and against with how well the Chiefs are playing. I will say that I think 7.5 is too many points. I don't know where that line's at right now. I know it was at 7.5, but that's a bit too many points in my opinion. I would set that probably around 5. I think Chiefs -5 would be the line that I think is fair, and I think this could be a closer game than we expect. But I think the Chiefs win. My dream scenario is that the Bengals get up 7-0 or 10-0, and I'm able to get a Chiefs hedge in and place a hedge that makes, no matter what, I win, 4 units or whatever it is. So that's my dream scenario for the Bengals to get off to a hot start. And it seems like, the Chiefs get off to slow starts very often. So it's not that crazy to hope for. But in terms of my bet, I wouldn't bet on either side of the game. I think the Chiefs win. I think it's closer than you think, though. But my bet on the game is the over. I got the over at 53.5. I think it's at 54.5 now. I'd still take it. The last 7 Chiefs overs have hit. The Chiefs are averaging 37.28 points per game in the last 7 games. The last time these teams played, it was 34-31 at 65 points total, and showed you why you bet the over when quarterbacks like this are involved. And we saw it obviously last week against Buffalo, like I just laid out, 2 minutes left, 47 points total, and it ends up being a 42-36 game. And that shows why you bet the over when you have teams like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. Like I said, I'm hoping that the Bengals get up early. Last time the Chiefs got up early and the Bengals stormed back. I'm hoping for the opposite, but I think this is a close game. I'll say it's tough. I'll say 37-31 Chiefs. They score in overtime. Goes to overtime again.
Oh man, overtime 2 weeks in a row. Yeah, I got the Chiefs in this one. This is not, well, I have money on the over on this game. I thought about taking the 7 points in the Bengals just because I did so well with underdogs last week, and 7 points is a lot of points in a conference championship game. But I can't get myself to pull the trigger just for the fact that the Bengals have kicked so many field goals. If they'd been putting the ball in the end zone the last 2 weeks, I would feel better about that. So I'm going to stay away from that. I do have money on the over, but I will take I will not take the Bengals. I'm taking the Chiefs in this one.
But yeah, we both think it's too many points. I'm right with you there.
Yeah. Okay, the other one, we've got the 49ers at the Rams, meeting for the 3rd time this season. This NFC title game has 2 teams from the most competitive division in the NFL. San Francisco swept the Rams in the regular season, including a 27-24 overtime win in Week 18 to get into the playoffs to begin with. Deebo Samuel had 133 yards in Week 10, 140 yards in Week 18. Aaron Donald never got a sack of Jimmy Garoppolo in the 2 games this season. Matthew Stafford struggled both times these teams faced, 4 touchdowns versus 4 interceptions in those 2 games. He was also sacked 5 times in the Week 18 matchup. The 49ers could not slow down Cooper Kupp in their previous matchups. He had 240 yards in the 2 games combined, but they did shut down the Rams' rushing attack, an attack that they're probably much less likely to trust after last week. What do you see in this game? What are you thinking?
You know where I'm going to go. I backed them the last 2 weeks, and I'm sticking with them. I think the Niners are a team that I wouldn't want to doubt if I was, if they're an underdog. And that's what it comes down to. You can copy paste my stats from the last couple of weeks. I'll say them anyway, since if you want to hear me like a broken record. But Kyle Shanahan's 28-17 against the spread as an underdog. He's 14-4 against the spread since 2019 as an underdog. And now with Jimmy G, he's 11-3 against the spread as a road underdog. And again, DVOA has these teams really close, just like last week against Green Bay. They have San Fran as the better team on DVOA, which is you don't always see when the underdog is getting points. And you brought up the Week 18 game. I don't often look back at, past games when I talk about a playoff game. I don't think that there's much to glean from it. But when you talk about the Niners and the Rams, you kind of have to, because Shanahan owns McVay. 6 straight times Shanahan's beaten them, and that game was the perfect example. All McVay had to do was step on the throat. It was 17-0 or 20-0. I forget what the score was, but they were up big on the 49ers in that game, and it could have kept the 49ers out of the playoffs. We could have saw the Saints instead of the 49ers get into the playoffs, which would have caused the NFC to look a lot different. We're probably looking at Packers-Rams then. But it's interesting that this is this is Sean McVay's last stand here. This is your former coworker. Like, this is the guy you own. Your team's Super Bowl or bust. They have Jimmy G. Like, if you're Sean McVay and you can't get this done, it's like, man, look in the mirror. That's a tough thing to figure out. He really owns you if that's the case. But I can't fade San Fran as an underdog. You don't bet against Patrick Mahomes to win a football game, and you don't bet against Kyle Shanahan as an underdog. And I'll add a third addendum to that. You don't bet on Sean McVay against Kyle Shanahan. So that's where I'm at, and that's why I'm back in the Niners. This is 50-50. This game is so 50-50 to me. I could see this game going either way. I'm saying both these games go to overtime. Again, we get another great weekend, and I'll say this one is I'll say 20-17, I'll say 20-17. The Niners pull off in overtime, and we get a change to that stat. It won't be the first team that gets the ball. Rams will get the ball, Stafford will throw a pick, and then the Niners kick a field goal. I just went way too in depth on predicting the game, but
there you go. If that happens, we're clipping this and we're putting it all over Twitter later.
That'd be great. Oh man. Yeah. I have the Chiefs winning on a walk-off touchdown where they get the ball first and people are upset again. And then the Rams losing because they get the ball first in overtime, but Stafford throws a pick. So either one of those hits, I'm a genius. If they don't, you forget it anyway.
The game goes to overtime and you're the 49ers and you win the toss. Do you just pick to kick off because your defense is better than your offense anyways? Like,
you hope that Green Bay's kicker is kicking off again, so you can get the ball at the 40 every time.
Yeah, there you go. For me, I think I agree with you. This game is a total coin flip. I lean slightly to the Rams because I just think I trust that offense more, and I know the 49ers have been shutting down offenses, but Matthew Stafford has looked in rhythm. They've looked like they did during their run earlier in the year. I slightly lean to the Rams, but I have money on the 49ers money line at plus 163 because I do think it's such a coin flip. It just makes sense for me from a gambling perspective to take the money line on the team that gets the best odds, because I truly think this one's just up in the air. So I'm going to pick the Rams slightly, but I really think this game can go whichever direction. I will be rooting for the 49ers in this one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I will be rooting hard for a 49ers appearance in the Super Bowl, even though I have Chiefs or I have Rams plus 800 to win the Super Bowl. I'm just going to ignore that because I don't think they're beating the Chiefs anyway. So I hope the Niners just end my hopes for that early.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for our Eagles offense review, our Eagles mailbag, our divisional review, our conference title game preview. We're kind of in the middle here where we're still covering the NFL, but we're getting into Eagles draft stuff, and our shows might get a little bit longer, but they're going to start coming back down as we have less and less games and then no games to talk about. So you guys keep it tuned here to the Painted Lines. Let us know what kind of content you want to see. There'll be mock drafts, there'll be player rankings, there'll be free agency coverage, all of that. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts for us?
I didn't plan one, so I'll just do my best bet for tonight. If you follow me, you know I've been on a bit of a heater gambling wise. I've been on a hell of a run here because I did not start January well. Notre Dame broke my heart in a bowl game, and then it led me on a bad path. I was down, I think, I believe I was down 32 units at one point in January. I am now up 12.5 units. My best bet tonight is Middle Tennessee State plus 2.5 at Marshall for 4 units in college basketball. Marshall's 3-14 against the spread, 2-8 against the spread as a favorite, 2-7 against the spread at home. They've lost 9 straight and are 0-9 against the spread in their last 9 games. Vegas has given Marshall too much respect all year. So ride with the Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders who come in winning 3 straight. I know everyone's got their mind on Middle Tennessee State Marshall tonight.
Absolutely. I don't have a final thought other than to say I really enjoyed listening to Mark try to close out the show last week.
Oh, man.
So, Mark, you want to give it another go? I'm willing to throw it back to you here.
No. Shane, anytime Shane is here, he will be introing and outroing us because if anyone who watches the Tough Cover oh, wait, no, Shane's left. No, I wouldn't. You can't do that to me. When I have to do the Tough Cover podcast by myself, I meticulously plan out my intros and outros because I am so nervous to do intros and outros. I have no problem reading like all these meticulous stats and against the spread numbers. I can give percentages. I can do all that. For some reason, my brain breaks when I have to be a host of a show.
I'm gonna go in and clip that and add it as a video in StreamYard so I can just roll that to end the show for us next time.
What, my outro?
Yep.
Keep chalking it up.
All right. Well, thank you, as always, for joining us for episode number 40 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure that you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Turn on your notifications. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. You can give him a follow at Mark Henry Jr. _. So for me, for Mark from the Painted Lines, and in honor of Mark, thank you for chalking it up with us.